Alaq, or the clot. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Recite in the name of the Lord, the Cherisher, who created man out of a mere clot of congealed blood. Proclaim, and thy Lord is most bountiful. He who taught the use of the pen, taught man that which he knew not. Nay, but man doth transgress all bounds, in that he looketh upon himself as self-sufficient. Verily to thy Lord is the return of all. Seest thou one who forbids a votary when he turns to pray? Seest thou if he is on the road of guidance or enjoins righteousness? Welcome, Sufism, Heart of Islam. Hi, Bahram.
Hi, Catherine. Okay, we are talking about Satan today. And Satan in Islam has a very specific meaning. Of course, in Christianity, I think it's the same. You have Lucifer, and then you have Satan. Lucifer, we are, in Islam, we say Iblis. Satan or Shaitan is after. So it's before and after thing.
It even sounds the same, Shaitan and Satan.
Yes. So Iblis was an angel who was serving God, and he was made of fire. He's unlike the other angels. He had a high elevated position, but his fabric is of fire. Now, after he gets kicked out of heaven and that domain, he becomes Shaitan or Satan. Satan means the one that is being pushed away, stoned away. You know, old days when they used to get rid of people, they used to stone them and sort of get rid of them. So Shaitan in Arabic basically means the one who is being got rid of by sort of randa shode. But his position before is Iblis.
Now, what does Iblis mean etymologically?
Iblis is just a name of an angel, angel that is made of fire.
The reason I'm asking is that I'm thinking of Lucifer, and in Latin, luz is light.
Yes.
So at that point, he was still a being of light.
Yes, but I think with Iblis, you talk more of a fire. Yeah, because I suppose if you look at it this way, the angels are made of light, and they do not possess any lower names of God, lower or attributes that are the lowers of the lower names and attributes.
Material.
Material. Yeah. So they don't understand sins as we know it. They don't understand light. So for them it's difficult. But because Satan was elevated, he was more elevated, that means he had possessed more names and attributes. He was more aware. He had one thing that the other didn't have. So he did understand. So his complaint was to God, how am I going to prostrate, bow to something that is lower than me? I am of a fire, and he is of soil. How am I going to do this? So because disobedient, he gets kicked out of heavens. Now, Satan in a way is an attribute. The name is still Lucifer, but his attributes become the one who disobeys. So when you talk about somebody who is disobedient, becomes Satan. So it comes with that particular attribute. In Sufism, when you talk about, you say in the other domain, there is Adam, there is Eve, and then there is Iblis. These three represent three different attributes, and also they represent three greater names of Allah. Adam, or human, is the world or the domain that is known as domain that deals with the seen, domain of seen, the domain of tangible. Aql, with humanity comes aql, or comes the wisdom or intellect. Intellect is the whole thing, something that consists of both domain of seen and non-seen. This is aql. So the first creation of God, or the first time that God manifested or express himself, he expressed himself in the wisdom. So everything comes from that wisdom. Now, our body, our physical body is Eve. So these things stand for different aspects of God. Yeah. So if Allah represents itself in seen and unseen, soul and physicality, so you could look at this in the breakdown and the descent of God's names and attributes to the humanity, insan, the one that was created in the, what insan means, both men and female, okay? The one that was created in the light and image of God, aql, the wisdom of God, and then Eve, the physicality, the way God expresses himself in such a beautiful, something comes from unseen into seen, from thought into idea. So that beautiful expression or that beautiful drawing becomes Eve. So God, Eve, or the feminine aspect of God, represent all the beauty of God that expresses itself. So when the Sufis talk about, for example, the 7th domain of love, when you come to the 6th domain, which is the domain of bewilderment, you see a beautiful woman, like a mannequin, like a beautiful model, standing out there looking at you. It's so beautiful that you become bewildered, you bow, you prostrate. This is you before you make it to the 7th domain, which is the state of withering away into God, or fana.
Annihilation.
Annihilation. So I think we should have one poem before we can carry on with this.
Okay. This poem is by Rumi. It's about initiation and it's entitled Work in the Invisible. The prophets have wondered to themselves, how long should we keep pounding on this cold iron? How long do we have to whisper into an empty cage? Every motion of created being comes from the Creator. The first soul pushes and your second soul responds. Beginning, don't stay timid. Look, load the ship and set out. No one knows for certain whether the vessel will sink or reach the harbor. Cautious people say, I'll do nothing until I can be sure. Merchants know better. If you do nothing, you lose. Don't be one of those merchants who don't risk the ocean. This is much more important than losing or making money. This is your connection to God. You must set fire to have light. Trust means you're ready to risk what you currently have. Think of your fear and hope about your livelihood. They make you go to work diligently every day. Now consider what the prophets have done. Abraham wore fire for an anklet. Moses spoke to the sea. David molded iron. Solomon rode the wind. Work in the invisible world, at least as hard as you do in the visible. Be companions with the prophets, even though no one here will know that you are, not even the helpers of the Qutbah, the Abdals. You can't imagine what prophets will come. When one of those generous ones invites you into his fire, go quickly. Don't say, will it burn me? Will it hurt?
Okay, thank you. This is Rumi again, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back to our discussion. We are talking about Satan and the meaning of the names and attribute that regards to Satan. So if we sum it up in this way, that in the other domain, there was Adam, Eve, Satan, okay? God had created these three factors with intelligence, with his own wisdom, aql, and then with that come illusion. So you have 5 aspects that is in that domain. The wisdom or the knowledge of God is something that man should have possessed. Satan comes and says, if you don't want to die, if you want to become eternal, you listen to me and you eat from such a fruit. Okay, these are the stories. We understand Quran and the holy books written in a language that is available to everybody. You don't need to be very educated. Everybody can read it and understand it and take something from it. These are the virtues of the holy books, which are hidden language, and they are for everybody. Doesn't matter what knowledge, what class, what strata, or so. So, when Satan offers man, you want to become eternal, okay? He is dealing with illusion, okay? He brings some illusion to man's mind. Because God had given all names and attributes to Adam. Adam had all names and attributes. So he was seeing the world in absolute. Now, but because man had to fall and experience and become the king of the world of, or the domain of sensible, there was no choice. In Sufism and in Irfan, these are the main factor. Man had no choice but to fall. Okay? Because this domain was made for it, to come and experience this domain. Why? Because if all knowledge is conceptual with God, man will experience this world in a very practical way. So God experiences this domain through us. Conceptually, he knows everything. He's all knowers. But in order to experience everything in a practical way, he will experience it through us. Because we are his expression, right? We were made in his name and his image. So with Satan comes illusion. Satan brings illusion. So when we, in Quran or Islamic philosophy, we talk about Satan, we talk about illusion. Okay? There is a reality. That reality is absolute. There is nothing wrong with it. It's totally positive and truthful. No wrongdoing or deception can ever enter it. And we understand, as we said before, La ilaha illallah means nothing exists but God. So there can never be anything beside God. The whole reality is about God only. Now, the only thing that is permitted to be beside that is an illusion. An illusion has no material or even immaterial basis. So illusion is nothing. So it's something that does have no existence whatsoever. Some sort of hallucination. So that's why when Quran talks about khalq and haq, khalq, population, creation, haq. Haq means the truth, right? The only thing exists is the truth. Khalq, us, this earth, everything is a shadow. And shadow is nothing but an illusion. So Satan, when you talk about Satan in Islamic thinking, you're only talking about illusion. It doesn't mean a thing that has horns and is this ugly thing and in that. So we at this level of Sufism, we're talking about illusion. What does that mean? We're all born into a family, into a culture, into a country. We grow up with certain education, status quo, all kind of media affecting our upbringing. When this becomes our experience, becomes this is how we structure a reality for ourselves. So if there is 6 billion people live on Earth, there is 6 billions of reality, right? 6 billion kind of illusion that is out there. That's why we have so many religions. You have more religion, you have more gods, you have more things that,
More than the
we only so we know there's only one truth, there's only one God, there's only one religion, and that's a religion of submission. Submission to the will of God. But because there is so many people, we all create a reality.
Such variance of interpretation for the individuals. It's because reality is a very personal construct.
Yes. So you construct this world for yourself, and you say, this is it, this is reality. You choose a religion that is fit within that reality. Okay, for example, if your father is pro-war, okay, you're growing up, that is sort of become acceptable to you. You will find a religion that is actually advocating that violence. You say, this is it. Somehow then you come and regenerate, reconstruct that religion, and you fit it with your own thinking. Now, this is what they call idol worshipping. You create an idol. You keep creating an idol for yourself, and you call it God. And you actually somehow connect it to that guy, and you say, to that Allah or God, and you say, this is it. The standard becomes your own standard. So how come, if you have, for example, your generosity, if it is, our generosity is very limited, right? We're only nice and kind to our own families, to our own environment, right? So when we see a poor person, we're going to help him, we put our hand in our pocket, we shake it, we make sure we find the smallest coin and we give it, right? So what people do, their own standard, they attribute it to God, and says, God is generous, and he's thinking about the standard that he advocates and exercises himself. So generosity of God for him is his own generosity. So his God or her God, standard of generosity is that. He can express or she can express anger. So to him, the expression of anger and wrath is that. So when you say, for example, in holy books you read, God, if you do not, for example, if you don't follow the laws, you will be punished. Right away comes to your mind the kind of punishment that you are capable of doing. And your kind of punishment is what?
Whatever retributive justice you think fits the occasion.
Exactly. Well, what is practiced in your country? It could be capital punishment, it could be imprisoning, it could be torturing, whatever. And that comes to your mind. Now, in Sufism, in Irfan, Islamic Irfan, this is not the case. The generosity of God, the compassion and the mercy of Allah, and his punishment is totally different to the way you think, or to the way you hallucinate, or to the way that one's construction is.
One's assumptions.
Or assumption is. So you understand God is all compassionate. When you say all compassionate, we're all breathing and enjoying life. Nobody is being denied. If somebody gets denied of that breath, they die right away, right? So everybody is using all the mercy that comes from God. We're all receiving it and we're all enjoying it. Whether you are an unbeliever or whether you're a believer, you both enjoy the mercy comes. Now, you could be an unbeliever and you could have a beautiful mansion, beautiful children, and a nice job and a beautiful life, right? And then you could be a good religious man, courteous, but be very poor and live at the basically bottom of the society. Okay? So the standard of thinking is this, okay, if I am good, so God should give me this and that. It's all about taking and taking. Now, these are all illusion. Illusion made by people, nothing to do with the reality. Reality functions in a different level and has purpose, has aim for every creature out there. Because this area is only a place of test and trial, it's a passage, has nothing to do, reality looks at it in a different way as we do. So when you deal with Satan in this school, it's not the one that comes with the wrath and take you...
Hellfire and damnation?
It is all about illusion. And the illusion is nothing but constructed of your mind. If you like to do some poetry on Rumi before we...
The fringe. You wreck my shop and my house and now my heart. But how can I run from what gives me life? I'm weary of personal worrying, in love with the art of madness. Tear open my shame and show the mystery. How much longer do I have to fret with self-restraint and fear? Friends, this is how it is. We are fringe, sewn inside the lining of a robe. Soon will be loosened, the binding threads torn out. The beloved is a lion. We're the lame deer in his paws. Consider what choices we have. Acquiesce when the friend says, "Come into me, let me show my face." You saw it once in pre-existence. Now you want to be quickened and quickened again. We have been secretly fed from beyond space and time. That is why we look for something more than this. Rush naked. A lover looks at creek water and wants to be that quick to fall, to kneel, then all the way down in full prostration. A lover wants to die of his love, like a man with dropsy who knows that the water will kill him, but he can't deny his thirst. A lover loves death, which is God's way of helping us evolve from mineral to vegetable to animal, the one incorporating the others. Then animal becomes Adam, and the next will take us beyond what we can imagine, into the mystery of what we're all returning. Don't fear death. Spill your jug in the river. Your attributes disappear, but the essence moves on. Your shame and fear are like felt layers covering cold. Throw them off and rush naked into the joy of death. This is Father Francis Testa with us today, and we're speaking about Rumi, new film from Imagica Productions. And Francis has recently been to LA, haven't you?
Yeah, I was there. Yeah,
and you were in promotion of the film.
I was. We were always talking, well, we're always talking about the Rumi script with, on the Rumi project with various people. We'd love to hear the reactions. As a matter of fact, I met an Afghanistan boy down there who is now in acting. And he was telling me that he used to listen to Rumi and the music when he was growing up in Afghanistan. So that was really a kind of a treat.
That must have been a joy for
It was,
him.
and he's really excited about the movie project.
It had a lot of influence on him then.
Well, I don't know, maybe it was the other way around, because I sat and listened to him talk about Afghanistan, and it was really good because in the script, which, you know, I'm writing the script, it took a lot to kind of imagine what it was like over there before wars and things, because at that point in history when Rumi was a boy, it was quite a nice place. The cities were built, and it was really wonderful there.
Well, I can imagine that writing the script for Rumi, the movie, would demand quite an active imagination.
Yeah, it really did. And, you know, the first thing, I'll be honest with you, you know, you look at the news reports of Afghanistan, it's just there's a lot of wars, and you think that's what it was like in Rumi's day, but when you read the history books and you find out what it was really like, there were beautiful cities, and they had domes, and there was a lot of literature and reading and understanding. It was just a really different world back then. So you had to almost imagine that world as what it once was and then recreate that. And it's going to be a real challenge for the filmmakers, because once we get on location and start looking for places to do it, I think it's going to be really challenging to get that sort of old world. You know, this is like the 12th century when Rumi grew up, so it's it could be a different feel altogether. But I'm excited about that.
Oh, it sounds very exciting, that 12th century construct into modern day media. On location in Afghanistan and Iran?
Well, I believe so. I understand that I was talking to the line producer, and he said that they think they're going to be shooting in Tajikistan, maybe.
Oh, wow.
Or because that's a little safer than Afghanistan right now. And then probably Turkey is to, you know, Rumi did die in Konya, Turkey. So, but there's beautiful sections of northern Iran. I don't know if we can send a second unit up to northern Iran to film some of that. But
well, so many countries would claim him as their own. Is it not true?
Well, you know, it's funny because this kid that I was telling you from LA, that he's an actor there now, he was saying that he believes that Rumi is Afghanistan's because Rumi grew up there. And then you talk to the people in Turkey and even in Iran, they believe that Rumi belongs to them. So how many other countries lay a hold of Rumi? I don't know. He traveled quite a bit, so we'll see where he ends up.
Lovely. Wow. So tell us about the process of writing, and how does one envision, I mean, such a universal figure, such a man, perfected man, poet, mystic, dreamer. Tell us, Francis, how does...
well, the biggest challenge for me, because I'm Catholic, I didn't have a lot of communication and experience with the Muslim or the Islamic faith. And so I really had to, I have read the Quran, like I read it about 7 years ago when I was studying in Rome. So I had to go back into the Quran, and then I started to read Rumi and his discourses on various things and his stories that he used to tell. And then I read his poetry and the Masnawi, and there was a whole bunch of different stuff to draw on. But then I had to study the history of that world because there's a whole bunch of political and military things going on in Rumi's life when he was there. There was a lot of, there's a lot of tribal warfare at the time. And all these things must have weighed heavily on him in the contextual realm, right? It's one thing to separate yourself in a mystical experience. You can be completely detached from the world, and God takes you into a realm that, it doesn't matter what politics or what religion, you enter a realm that's completely other, right? And I'm sure Rumi got there. Many of his poems express that experience that he had in some sort of mystical realm. But on the other hand, there's the day-to-day life, and that is something that also enters into the situation because Shams, his mentor and spiritual master at one point, had to run away twice, and he had to go find him. Now, whether or not he left voluntarily or he left because there was some sort of coercion factor.
Intrigue or something political.
Exactly. You don't really know. There's various tales that sort of tell that story. And what I did for the script was I had to, and this will come down to when we start debating with the producers and the director about what exactly should go on. But generally speaking, there's a consensus in the histories that Shams had to leave under duress. So he, on the one hand, as a spiritual guide, he left Rumi voluntarily at one point, and then he came back voluntarily, and then the second time he probably left under duress and never saw Rumi again. And that, for the story, is very important for the character of Rumi because at both intersections of his life, when Shams came in and departed, something changes in Rumi, and that changes in the film as well. And so the character undergoes many emotional and spiritual changes that tell the story of what it was like to grow up in that part of the world, to be a faithful Muslim, and at the same time to enter into this mystical state that very few people ever enter into, and then communicate that through his poetry.
So perhaps then separation or loss refines something in his spiritual makeup or even his character.
Well, I think so, because, you know, it's like a little kid that spends all his time with his mother, and then one day his mother's not there, and he's freaked out, and he starts crying, and if his mother never comes back for a long time, it changes him. He becomes self-sufficient. He has to learn to think for himself. And Rumi, in a lot of ways, when I studied his writings, I found that there were points in his life when he would be reaching for something and it didn't come, and then Shams came along and took him to another level, and then Shams goes away, and then Rumi enters another level.
And he has to learn to supply that for himself?
Well, I don't know about that as much as he has to turn back to God, looking for Shams in the presence, as they referred to God, and find that God and Shams were both there. When Shams went away, God stepped in and became more of a powerful presence in Rumi's life. That's the way I've interpreted it.
Wow.
Now, again, that's open to interpretation, however, but I see it as if all things come from God, then surely Rumi's experience is one that directly derives from his relationship with Shams, and when Shams steps out of the picture, God fills it over abundantly to the point where Rumi is, as the poem you just read, ready to run into heaven as naked as the day he was born.
Sorry, at the beginning, I can't help but think how dramatic that bit will be, the meeting, the first meeting with Shams.
Well, in the movie, Shams drives up in a Jeep because...
A little modernization.
Just adapting
post-modernity.
It for the modern. So it's a totally different take on that whole relationship. But in fact, in the script that I've written, that there were many times when, you know, you're looking for powerful imagery that touches on the world that Rumi grew up in, the contextual reality, and then there's the poetic reality, the spiritual reality that has to all comes in at the same time in a film. So in the film, Rumi is praying because something bad has just happened to him, and he's looking to God again for enlightenment, some guidance. And in this beautiful sort of sunrise, he sees the man far off in the distance, enveloped in the sun. And that's Shams.
Which is Shams, the sun.
Which is Shams, the sun, exactly. And so he looks for that man. He disappears in the golden light, and then he sees him later on in the day, and he meets the man, and that's it. And he knows this is the guy that, this one's sent for me. I'm here to, you know. And Shams tells him, I've come looking for that student that's worthy of me, and you're the one. So there's quite several moments where Rumi is looking, and then when he finds Shams, it has to be bathed in that glorious moment of encounter.
Wow, glorious indeed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was good.
I see what you see.
Do you? You like that scene?
Just about.
Well, that's the thing about movie making. You know, despite everything, you really still have to communicate what's on paper visually, and so you rely heavily on the people that draw the artwork, the cameraman, the director, and ultimately you rely on that great medium of film to tell a story. And I hope we can do justice to the story.
Oh, I'm sure that will happen.
I hope so.
It's a pretty big picture.
It's a very big picture. There's
you met
a lot
with
of
the
stuff.
producers recently, didn't you?
I met with the
Scott
producers.
Frank
Yeah, I met with the producers, and the producers are, well, as a writer, I can tell you they're acting like producers.
Well, expand on
that. Well, producers are never happy until they've spent less than what they planned on and gotten more than what they paid for. So
sounds interesting with the budget of perhaps bringing in the Iranian military.
Yeah.
For logistics?
Well, they say that. Honestly, I don't know. I haven't really been kept up to speed on exactly what the planning is. But I can imagine it's going to be pretty exciting once they get going.
Wow.
Well, there's only a couple of times we really need that many guys, right? When Genghis Khan invades and wipes out Nishapur at some point, and then...
Yikes.
I think I'm pronouncing that right. You know, I get 3 different pronunciations from depending on who the people are from that part of the world. So I'm careful to try and remember each pronunciation and try all 3 in various crowds.
Francis, tell us more about the actual process of writing.
Okay.
And just from any angle, any approach you'd like to take on that, because it sounds at once joyous and also laborious, of course, because good writing, as we know, is rewritten writing.
Right.
So
Yes, very much so. Well, the process I first took was essentially to create myself an outline, a structure for the film that I believe would work on a cinematic level. And then I started to study the characters, because what's really important in a film like this is the character-driven story. A lot of the emotional waves, the emotional impact that the audience will feel will be communicated directly through how the characters come to life or die on screen.
Precisely.
Right? And then finally, you need what I like to call the big stroke, some dramatic backdrop that adds effect and dimension to the history of this character. So taking all that into account, I had to study the travel, like what journey, what road would he have taken as a boy when his father decided to leave Balkh and head over to Iran, and then eventually they ended up in Turkey. So that journey I mapped out along the mountains. And then I created this whole time context when the Genghis Khan and his invaders were coming over the mountains into Afghanistan. And then using that, and then the Shams encounter, and then the spiritual journey that Rumi's on. All these things had to be documented, and I had to write out what we call backstories and character bios for every one of those players in the film. Because when you enter the movie, you don't have time to tell all that story. So what you're relying on is the depth of understanding of why the character would, for instance, drink water in a particular scene versus eating a date versus saying something. Like it's all driven by the real character, the real person in that film. And you have to create it to have weight on screen, right?
And perhaps the cultural or religious context, the ritualistic context.
Yeah, all these things have to be accounted for because it'll feel very authentic, even though it doesn't have to do everything that a Muslim would in every moment. But he has to be a real Muslim, and he has to really understand why. And the writer, as the writer, I have to know all this stuff and bring it into the character so that whatever I write comes across as authentic. Otherwise,
and to how to have the viewer experience a journey.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Because without that,
wherever it takes us.
Yeah,
wherever it takes the individual.
Yeah, because you don't want them watching your movie and like having no emotional connection to it whatsoever. Yeah, it's like, well, why is he doing that? Like, who cares? I gotta go, you know. And that's the worst problem. And in the movie business, I would say that the biggest problem in the movie business is cheap scripts that are spent lots of money on, and they still can't get the depth because they didn't spend enough time working the material before they got to the screen. And I'm making sure that in this case it's not happening, at least as much as I can at this point. So that's where the writing process, I had to write all that stuff out too, right? Before I actually start writing the script, I got to have all these materials down that I can refer to at any moment. And then I map out my story, and then I create scenes that are as dramatic and as interesting as possible to communicate what I need for the story to move along, and also for the character to develop within the scope of the story.
Well, how has your Catholic faith served as a vehicle for your writing? How has it strengthened you? How has it helped your foundation dealing with this? Because it sounds like you're really extending your hours to have this come to completion, to fruition.
Well,
for the timeline. For example, the release will be in 2009, correct?
Right.
Well,
that's right.
It looms large, right?
Yeah, that looms large. Well, that's a year. Well, you know, ultimately, I don't know.
And it will be released in Canada.
It'll be released all over. I think we're going to go to the Cannes Film Festival with this baby because it's going to be that good.
Wow.
When we're done, it's going to be that good. No, it's a good question about my Catholicism, because Catholicism, in my understanding of the faith, we don't need to judge people for what they are. So we just have to meet them and find out what they are. And in that, we find out there's a richness of the human experience from all parts of the world, okay? And it doesn't make me superior or inferior. It just means that we're different at this point. Mm-hmm. And so what Catholicism really does, and I think what it's really done for me as a writer, is allow me to find a certain amount of security in not being afraid to address somebody's life that is completely different from mine, completely different religious beliefs, and accept them at the outset for what they are. That's their situation. And then afterwards, to go and find out what drives them in certain directions, okay? And then what I can do at that point as a Catholic is bring in the history of art and literature that I've studied and try and enrich whatever I'm writing.
Very rich.
To bring that human experience, which maybe this character or this person has never had because they grew up in that part of the world, because they don't have that kind of education, because of whatever, and try and enrich their understanding by adding a little bit of more sort of, I don't know, whatever I can bring to it that would make it more cinematic, principally, right? Because as a screenwriter, I'm not writing a novel, I'm writing a film, and film is about visuals, and visuals have to be exciting, and that's what drives people to the theater.
And as a Catholic, your faith is well-founded. This is not a quest theme for you.
No.
But still the empathy of the quest as a Sufi, as a mystic, as someone seeking annihilation into and with God. You can use your prayer and meditation and your rich heritage and your practice in order to support you in your writing efforts.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's very true, because part of my a great part of my prayers when I'm working on the Rumi script is to understand that I don't need to, I'm not preaching my message, I'm bringing Rumi to life for many people who don't know who he is, and those who do. And if God loves both of us, and I believe that that's true, then he can help me to understand that, because he was there when Rumi was searching, and I wasn't. So those kinds of insights,
message.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Those kinds of insights can come from God, and I can use them. And
it's lovely.
And you have to kind of keep your ears open for the whispers of God, because he doesn't talk very loud, unless you're, he doesn't. He whispers very quietly. So if you can listen and get those, you can get some really nice insights, and it comes from everybody too, right? Like, I'm not an expert in Rumi, but there are many experts that love a certain facet of Rumi, and they'll say something to me. I'll think, oh, hey, that would be great. That would enrich this particular scene, so I'll just tweak that a little bit and fix it up and get it back in there. And that's where you got to listen, because people talk, and especially people that love Rumi or know lots about him that I don't, or I haven't read yet. And they bring a certain, well, they open up the scope of inspiration. And
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's part of the whole process of writing.
So have you experienced what the secular world refers to as synchronicity? You've met people, there's been certain instances where it's like, hey, I needed to know this, and here it's coming at me at a time where I can receive it.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that happens all the time. Whether or not synchronicity is a real cosmic force, I don't know. I don't know if I buy that.
Or even a precise enough term for that.
I don't know about that, but people love terms, and so synchronicity.
Well, in the temporal world, anything to do with time,
about it, right? Didn't they have an album? So it must have been great,
well,
that's why it's flying.
Right.
Okay, but that's really where we're at on the faith related to this Rumi script, because Rumi is also a challenging figure. I mean, he comes from a world that most people don't know about in the West. I mean, we just don't. We haven't lived there, unless you lived there and came to the West, right?
Well, certain modern authors have made him a little bit more accessible to us. Coleman Barks, perhaps.
Right. I know, and that's true too. And again, translations can always, they say the traitor is in the translation. So, you really don't know. You have to, there's a certain way of studying history, and it's called phenomenological study. And that means you imagine yourself in that scene, and you're like, okay, if I was having bombs dropped on me, I'm in the Second World War, I'm in a house, and I'm getting bombs dropped on me, and I got to find my way out because it's all black. Well, you know what? That's not a historical translation. That's a real emotional experience. And as a writer, phenomenological application of understanding of history allows you to experience things that are completely not academic. They're completely human. And when you're there and you're imagining it and you realize that, well, wait a sec, the guy wouldn't possibly have started to worry about, writing his next book at that moment, probably. He probably would have been worried about saving his own butt by getting out of that house. And when you go back to Rumi's day, if you felt that Genghis Khan was coming over the mountains to kill everybody in your town, well, probably you weren't worried about spirituality at that moment. You were worried about getting the heck out of town.
Surely.
So because of that, it alters the condition of the character. It also alters the flavor of the story. But it also brings to mind that there are certain things affecting people's lives that they carry emotionally with them for the rest of their life. So what I did discover about Rumi is that he had Christian people that liked him in the area that he lived. And some of them were killed by very radical believers in Islam, okay? And he tried to defend some of them, right?
Oh, did he?
Yeah, in a way that said, listen, this is what the Quran says, this is what Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, we got to do this. And they said, no, shut up, we'll take care of this. And they cut the heads off, right? It's a great scene. I put it in the movie. Whether it stays, I don't know, that's another question. But what I discovered,
shows how he extended himself.
Right, well, how he understood that, wait a sec, there's a little bit more to it, and we do have a certain respect for these people, even if they're not believers in the way we understand it, they also believe in the one true God.
People of a book, children of Abraham.
Children of Abraham.
Right.
So there's these things that, those are very strong dramatic moments in life. They're not related to his poetry, but they are later on when he starts talking about God as the beloved. And that's a concept that many radicals or people that want the struggle to be bloody and violent all the time, they don't like that language. And it affects them in a negative sense.
It's mystical.
Yeah. Well,
it's union. It's mystic union.
Well, it also threatens the power structure, politically power structure.
Cosmic consciousness would do.
Okay, there you go. So that's what I'm talking about. It's like you bring those elements into a person's life, and he's thinking about it, even if he doesn't talk about it explicitly in his writings. And those things all weigh in on what he does. And that's how you enrich a character, by understanding what he really probably went through by living in that context, right?
And did you learn that much of it was recitation?
Recitation?
Oral? Did he speak a lot of his poems first, or
write
them down in solitude, or was it a...
No, a great number of his poems were dictated and his students wrote them.
Right. As he was circumambulating.
Exactly, and that's what I'm saying, circumambulating, and then he's like, and he's having experiences.
Be in a state, he would be in a
And the fact that he could pour these poems out is really kind of cool when you think about it, because he's in a state, and he may or may not know exactly what he's saying, and then his student, but he wrote, he dictated and wrote, he did write his own, but many of those poems were dictated.
Quatrains or couplets, and then the Mathnawi, the structure of it.
Yeah, which is also another interesting facet, because Rumi would have been educated in a way that his mind would think in those types of structures for poetic verse.
It's incredible.
It is incredible. And a lot of times in history, we don't get it. We bring in a North American, or even I would say a more casual understanding of what people went through, but their studies back then were way more rigorous, because they only had that. That was the method to become enlightened. And it wasn't taken very lightly at all. Now you've got all kinds of ways that people think they get educated, by reading the internet or reading newspapers or reading magazines, but there's no formal study there. It's just a bunch of sound bites.
Chicken soup for the soul light or something.
Chicken soup for the soul. Well, even lighter than that, because chicken soup does have occasional depth to it. But anyway, Rumi's character is very rich in his history and in what he brought to the world through his poetry. And I think all of that, if you could put it into a nice dramatic package, you'd have a very good film and an entertaining film, and also you'd have a very authentic replication of what this man went through. And that's what I hope to accomplish.
Authenticity.
Authenticity, that's right.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Francis.
Thank you. It was great being here.
Thank you.
Imagica Film Productions, Vancouver's newest and most exciting production company located in North Vancouver. Imagica offers a wide range of production and post-production needs, including studio space, green room, white room, lighting, cameras, sound engineering, and editing. Contact us at 604-689-4624 or visit us online at www.imagicaproductions.com.